During this lesson you will be required to fill out a worksheet. I recommend you read through the worksheet before viewing the lesson. In order to give you time to do this, you can use the pause button at the bottom of the screen. Learning outcomes. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to list the 3 causes of movement in brickwork. List 2 precautions that can be taken to prevent brickwork from cracking. State the distance between expansion joints in straight walls, curved walls and in freestanding walls. State the vertical spacing used for wall ties around expansion joints. State one method that can be used to allow wall ties to move in expansion joints. State what materials are used to fill expansion joints. And state the maximum vertical distance for expansion joints in multi-storey buildings. Here is an example of an expansion joint made in brickwork. Standard expansion joints are approximately 10 millimeters in width. We can see that the main part of the joint is filled with easily compressible filler, something like Flexel, and then the outer part of the expansion joint needs to be sealed from the weather, so usually with some kind of silicone. Expansion joints. All building materials are subject to movement in use. Brickwork is no exception. This movement within the structure is in response to various temperature changes, moisture content, and variation or deformation under load of either the material itself or adjacent materials. Bed joint reinforcement can assist in controlling cracking in brickwork. However, if movement is not allowed to take place in a controlled manner, internal stresses will be set up and cracking or distortion is likely to occur. So we have to allow for this movement. This is normally done by introducing horizontal and vertical movement joints into the structure. Here we can see an example of an expansion joint in a brick-faced building. Vertical joint spacings. Vertical movement joints to accommodate horizontal movement, that's from side to side, for a half brick thick skin to a cavity walling should be positioned at 10 to 12 meter centres maximum. On corners or returns, they should be positioned 6 metres either side of the corner as shown. So we're still running with that 10 to 12 millimeter runs, except for this time it's continuing around the corner. Movement joints in brickwork staggered with those in blockwork. Where a cavity wall is required to have movement joints to the inner leaf, these joints where possible should be staggered with those on the outer leaf as shown below. This is to avoid having a major weak spot in the building, and also to avoid the likelihood of moisture penetration through the face of one expansion joint and then travelling through to the inside through another expansion joint. The spacing for expansion joints in freestanding walls should be no more than 6 metres apart. It should, however, be noted that copings on these walls should have movement joints at intervals of 3 metres. This is due mainly to their exposed nature and having less resistance. A similar provision should be made for parapet walls due to their greater exposure and less resistance to expansion and contraction. A stronger mortar mix is suggested for these types of walls. So we can see for the parapet wall, the expansion joints should be every 6 metres, and on the cappings on top of the parapet wall, the expansion joints should be every 3 metres. Wall ties. It should be remembered that additional wall ties will be necessary across the cavity either side of the movement joint. These are usually positioned every 225mm vertically, and they should be kept back at least 100mm from the expansion joint itself. There are also special wall ties that can be used over the movement joint itself, which have a rubber sleeve over each side that allows the tie to slide without restricting movement, as shown below. Expansion joints. All movement joints should be filled with the correct material, such as a butyl rubber, silicone or Flexel. The important thing is that whatever filler is used, that it's resistant to weather and also allows or doesn't restrict the movement of the brickwork. Horizontal joint spacing. Vertical movement is currently considered to be about the same as horizontal movement. However, in multi-storey framed buildings, the outer leaf of brickwork is usually supported at intervals of not more than 9 metres or every third storey, whichever is the least. It is common practice to incorporate a support at every second storey, thus providing opportunity to locate movement joints with reduced thickness. Movement in curved walling. Movement joint spacings should be at intervals of 7 to 8 metres maximum. Coping and capping courses should have movement joints at half of these distance. So we can see in the diagram down below, we have for the main walling itself, we have the expansion joint every 7 to 8 metres, and then on the cappings we just have this distance, so approximately 4 metres each. In a serpentine wall, movement joints should be placed so that they do not interfere with the structural action of the section, preferably in full or multiples of wavelengths and at the point of reverse curvature, as seen here. Conclusion. Movement in brickwork is caused by temperature changes, moisture content, and deformation under load. Cracking of brickwork can be prevented by introducing expansion joints and or reinforcing. The distance between expansion joints should be 10 to 12 metres for straight runs, or 6 metres around corners. Should be 8 metres for curved work and 6 metres for freestanding walls. The vertical spacing for wall tiles on either side of the expansion joint should be 225 mm. Rubber sleeves can be used to allow wall tiles to move in the expansion joint. Expansion joints are filled with a compressible filler and faced up with some type of silicone. And the vertical distance for expansion joints in multi-storey buildings is 9 metres.